Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I never believed in ghosts. Not in the slightest. Wrestling is all about illusions, right? It's about the spectacle, the larger-than-life moments, the drama that plays out under blinding arena lights. There's no room for the supernatural in a world built on scripts and stunts. That's what I thought, at least, until one night at a WWE house. Show changed everything. I was working backstage as a production assistant, hauling equipment, checking cables, making sure everything ran smoothly. It was one of those small venues, the kind that had probably hosted boxing matches long before WWE came to town. The floors were old and creaky, the kind of wood that soaked up decades of sweat and blood. Dim, flickering lights lined the narrow hallways, buzzing like angry insects. Most of the crew had already left, their laughter and conversations fading into the cool night air. I was the last one inside, packing up some last-minute gear near the locker rooms. That's when I heard it, a deep, guttural breathing. At first, I thought it was a leftover sound effect, maybe some malfunctioning speaker still playing a loop of crowd noise. But no, the sound wasn't distant or electronic. It was close, real, heavy, like someone standing just around the corner, sucking in air through clenched teeth. I turned my head, half expecting to see one of the wrestlers messing around, maybe a janitor finishing up for the night. But the hallway was empty. Then, from the far end of the corridor, a locker door slammed shut. The kind of slam that echoed. The kind of slam that didn't come from a loose hinge or a gust of wind. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I was alone. I knew I was alone, but someone or something had just moved. A chill swept over me, the kind that starts at the back of your neck and crawls down your spine. My fingers clenched around the strap of my bag as I took a slow, reluctant step forward. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe one of the doors had been left half open and settled shut. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me after a long night. But then I saw it. A tall, shadowy figure stood in the doorway of the locker room at the end of the hall. It didn't move. It didn't shift. It just stood there, perfectly still, blocking the dim light from the flickering overhead bulbs. No face, no features, just a black mass of darkness, dense and unnatural, as if the very air had thickened into something solid. I stopped breathing. I don't know how long I stood there, my pulse hammering in my ears. Seconds, minutes, time stretched thin, warping around that impossible, motionless thing in the doorway. Then it lurched forward, not walking, not stepping, gliding, like a film reel skipping frames, like it wasn't bound by the same laws as the rest of us. The space between us shrank, 10 feet, then 5, then 3. My muscles locked, my brain screaming and my body move, run, do something, but I was frozen in place, trapped in the gravity of whatever this thing was. And then, in a voice like rusted metal, like wind howling through a broken window, it spoke. It whispered my name, right in my ear. I bolted. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I turned and sprinted down that hallway, so fast my vision blurred. The air felt thick, pressing against my chest like unseen hands trying to hold me back. I didn't care. I did not care. I hit the exit door so hard it flew open, spilling me out into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I was in my car, keys shaking in my fingers as I jammed them into the ignition. The drive home was a blur. My brain refused to process what had just happened. For days, I told myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination. Maybe I had imagined the voice, imagined the shadow. Maybe the mind plays tricks on you when you're tired. Then, a week later, I heard the story. An old-timer on the crew, a guy who'd been around long before me, pulled me aside during another show. "You ever worked that venue alone?" he asked. I hesitated. "Yeah, why?" He sighed, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. "You hear anything weird?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He nodded, as if he already knew. Years ago, back in the 90s, a wrestler died in that locker room. Real freak accident. Some say he never left. My stomach clenched. I wanted to ask for details, who it was, what happened, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I never set foot in that venue again. And if you ever find yourself alone in the locker room of an old wrestling arena, and you hear heavy breathing when no one else is around, run. Story 2. I used to work the graveyard shift at the WWE Performance Center. Boring job, really. Just me, a bunch of empty training rings, and the occasional late-night janitor who kept to himself. The place was always quiet at night, almost unnervingly so. That was fine by me. I wasn't much for crowds, and I liked the solitude. Until the night I realized I wasn't alone. It was around 2 a.m., deep into my shift, when I was making my usual rounds. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, throwing pale light across the rows of empty rings. I walked past them, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. That's when I noticed it. One of the rings, the ropes were moving, just the slightest sway, like someone had just climbed in or out. I stopped, stared, listened. Nothing. No sounds except the low buzz of the lights and the distant hum of an air vent kicking on somewhere in the building. Still, something fell off. I pulled out my flashlight, clicked it on, and swept the beam over the ring. The mat was empty. The steel posts stood still. The turnbuckles sat undisturbed. But I knew what I had seen. I stepped closer, my boots making a soft, scuffing sound against the polished floor. That's when I heard it. A thud. Loud. Sharp. The unmistakable sound of a body hitting the mat. My breath caught in my throat. I pointed my flashlight straight at the ring, half expecting to see someone lying there. But there was no one. Just empty space. For ropes. A flat mat. I swallowed hard, my pulse pounding in my ears. Maybe it was the building settling. Maybe it was some kind of weird echo. Then, out of the corner of my eye, the turnbuckle moved. Not much. Just a shift, like someone was climbing up. I backed away slowly, my skin prickling with cold. The air around me felt heavier, thicker. I could hear myself breathing, shallow and fast. Then the ropes creaked again. I wanted to run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, walk out, and never come back. But something held me there. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was the stubborn, rational part of my brain trying to tell me there had to be a logical explanation. I forced myself to take another step closer. My flashlight trembled slightly in my grip as I aimed it toward the ring, tracing the edges of the mat, the ropes, the posts. And that's when it happened. A handprint, right in the center of the ring. A single, fresh handprint pressed into the vinyl mat. I felt something cold rush through me, like an ice bath straight to the spine. The ring had been empty a second ago. I had been watching it the whole time. There was no way, that should have been there. I turned on my heel and walked out. Not ran, not sprinted, just walked. Steady, measured steps, like I wasn't completely losing my mind. I signed out of my shift early that night, and I never came back. Later, I heard rumors, whispers among the other night staff, stories they only told in hushed voices over late-night coffee. Years ago, a young wrestler had been training alone late at night, pushing himself too hard. He climbed to the top rope for one last move. A moonsault, they said, but he lost his footing, snapped his neck on impact. He died before the paramedics arrived. The higher-ups never talked about it. They cleaned up fast, made sure the story never made news. But the ones who worked the night shift, the ones who heard things, saw things, they knew. And now so do I. Story 3. You ever see something you just can't explain? I mean, really see it? Not some story you read online or a rumor passed around in dimly lit bars, but something that happens right in front of your own two eyes. Something that doesn't make sense, something that leaves a hole in your mind where logic used to be. I have, and I'll never forget it. This happened years ago when I was working the indie wrestling circuit. You know, those tiny shows that WWE puts on in towns, so small you'd miss them if you blinked on the highway. No TV cameras, just a couple hundred die-hard fans, folding chairs set up around the ring, and an announcer trying to hype up the crowd like it was WrestleMania. That night, the venue was an old community center, one of those places that smelled like dust and sweat and memories no one wanted to talk about. The kind of building that had seen better days. The walls were yellowed with age, and the flickering fluorescent lights hummed like they were whispering something just out of earshot. We had run through most of the card, and the main event was just about to start. Nothing unusual. The crew was in place. The crowd was buzzing, waiting. The announcer was about to introduce the wrestlers. And then it happened. The bell rang, loud and clear, the kind of ring that signals the start of a fight. Only, there was no one in the ring. At first, everyone thought it was just a mistake. Maybe one of the refs bumped the bell. Maybe some idiot kid in the crowd got too close and hit it. But then, the ropes moved. Not a little shake, not a tremor from the wind. They snapped back like someone had just bounced off them. I heard it, felt it. That thwack of tightened ropes when a body hits them and launches forward. The crowd went quiet. You ever heard a room full of people go dead silent all at once? It's the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, a vacuum that makes every hair on your body stand up. Then the mat shuddered. A bump, a heavy one, like someone just got slammed onto the canvas. But there was no one there. I looked at the crew. They were just as frozen as I was. The announcer had gone pale, gripping the mic like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. Then came the footsteps, loud, deliberate, stomping, not fast, not a shuffle, but the slow, purposeful steps of a wrestler walking the ring. One step, boom, another, boom, coming from nowhere, coming from everywhere. I felt a pressure in my chest, something heavy, something wrong, like the air had thickened, like the weight of something unseen had settled over us all. The lights above the ring flickered. A buzzing sound filled the room, sharp and high-pitched, like a scream trapped in electricity. And then, the slam, louder than anything I'd ever heard before. A full-body impact, the kind that makes the ring shake, the kind that makes your teeth rattle. The sound of someone being powerbombed into the mat. The lights went black for half a second, just long enough for every single one of us to feel the dark claw at our skin, then snapped back on, and everything stopped. The ring was still. The air was normal again. The ropes were motionless. Silence. Then, like someone had hit play on the world again, the murmuring started. The nervous laughter. People asking each other if they'd just seen what they thought they saw. The show went on. What else could we do? We brought out the wrestlers, finished the match, but no one forgot what happened. Later that night, I heard the whispers. Not from fans, not from random conspiracy nuts, but from the old-timers. The ones who had been in the business long enough to see things that don't make sense. They said there was a wrestler, a man whose name had been lost to time. He wrestled back in the old territory days, before WWE swallowed everything up. He was known for his brutal matches, for never backing down, and for dying before he ever got his last fight. No one knows how. Some say an accident. Some say something worse. But one thing's for sure. That night, in that tiny forgotten venue, where the walls held memories no one wanted to talk about, he finally got his match. And God help us all if he ever wants another.